Welcome back everyone, I'm Jared Fink and this is Fretboard Music Theory. Today we're going to do things a little different and we're going to be talking about staff notation and how to read staff paper. Now don't get scared off, I know that this is a series on fretboard music theory, but it's essential that you understand the basics of how to read staff music and notation on this type of format. Just so you guys can see what the basic form would look like. That's what a note is represented by on staff music. Now you'll notice there's two sections to staff music. We've got this upper section and this lower section. So this upper section, this sign is called a treble clef, and this lower section is called a bass clef. And as you can almost tell in the name, the treble clef is going to be your higher registers and the bass clef is going to be where your lower notes would be. Alright, so you'll notice that I've put a line right in the middle of these two sections. This is what on the piano would be considered middle C. And from this point you would go either lower or higher. Now you could simply recite the alphabet backwards this direction and forwards this direction, and you would have all the notes. What I'd like to share with you though is that there's a few quick phrases that you can memorize that will easily help you remember what note is on each line or which space. As you'll see now, I've written out all the letters surrounding that middle C, and if you go upwards, it's the same as reciting the alphabet, and if you go downwards, it would be just like going backwards on the alphabet. This can be confusing if you need to quickly identify a certain line or space, higher or lower. And so there's actually some phrases that you can memorize that will help you quickly remember what note is associated with a certain line or space. So on the upper section, which is called your treble clef, I've written out some words to fill out those letters. And if you start on the first line, it says every, and then you go to the next line and it says good, then continue up, every good boy does fine. So that's one that you should definitely memorize. It's just a quick way to remember that your first line above the middle C is going to be an E. The second line is going to be a G. The third line is going to be a B. Then the fourth line would be a D. And then the fifth line would be an F. Now you'll notice that I wrote the letters for the spaces out away from the other words just so that you could see it more clearly. So if you spell them from the bottom, working your way up, you've got an F, an A, a C, and an E. And what does that spell? Face. So that's just a real easy word to remember if you ever want to know what letters correspond with the notes in the spaces. So just as we learned that on the treble clef, you can just memorize the words, every good boy does fine. Down here, you just continue that phrase, but switch it up a little bit and say, good boys do fun activities. And so if you memorize that phrase, you can remember that your first line is going to be a G, next line is going to be a B, next line a D, next line an F, and then the last line would be an A. And it's just that simple trick. Likewise, just as we spelled out the word face for where the letters of these spaces are, down here it's an A and a C and an E and then a G. So what I'll do is I just memorized the word ace, and then you just got to remember that there's a G up there. Okay, so we tackled the notes of staff music. Well, let's do a little bit of translating what we just learned for staff music into our fretboards. So if you're playing a mandolin, your first note is going to be a G. Now if you take our staff board, the G that I just played, the lowest string on a mandolin, is going to be this G right here. So as you work up the scale on a mandolin, this would be the first note that you're playing, and you would work your way up. Likewise, on a guitar, our first note is going to be what's considered an open E. Now, interestingly enough, if you're just using the basic form of staff music, the E would actually be way down here. We can't even put it on this board. So what you would do in a traditional sense is, if you had a sheet, you would just put some lines down here and continue your notes down. But since we don't have that luxury right now, I'm going to show you that the open G string on a guitar is the exact same note as the G string on our mandolin. So in other words, if you want to find where the notes are of a guitar on staff music, you could base it off that same G note right here, and this would be the open G on a guitar. That would be the same note as your low open G string on a mandolin. If you're playing a banjo, your lowest string is actually going to be a D, but for simplicity's sake, your next string is an open G. So if you can just remember the similarities between the guitar and the mandolin and the banjo, it'll help you get a uniform understanding of where the notes of staff music apply to the notes on these instruments. Open G, open G, and open G. As long as you can identify the common similarities, you can work the fretboard lower or higher based on those open G notes. Thanks so much for watching. If this was helpful for you, please like the video and share it with others, and consider subscribing to the channel. Catch you in the next one.